There we go. All right. So this is MC and Mad Talk to Civil War, episode 11. Today we talk about the Confederate States of America's Navy, if you can call it a Navy. This is a weak spot in the Confederacy, and it would be throughout the war. The only thing they actually really did well was raiding after they broke the blockade, and also breaking said blockade and running goods back and forth, in my opinion.
They didn't break the blockade.
That blockade had leaks, man. That blockade was leakier than the fucking wall on the border of Mexico.
If the blockade was that leaky, then you should have no complaints about the Anaconda plan.
Fuck the Anaconda plan. They initiated that immediately too. So fuck you. Like,
so that blockade wasn't as leaky as you seem to think.
Well, I mean, we didn't fucking have food towards the end of the war, so yeah, you got a goddamn point. As I said in the opener, that
you didn't have food at the end of the war. You had plenty of food at the end of the war. Just ask the Union troops marching through Georgia.
Oh, okay. We also have 40 ounce here. Welcome to the Civil War episodes. You haven't been here yet. Welcome, sir.
Howdy.
And also Jensen Quinn for the British perspective, because the Brits were the only ones that gave a fuck about us. Like, fuck the rest of you got motherfuckers, especially the French. Where were you? Like, oh, come on. You saved Washington's punk ass. You couldn't save Lee's? Give me a fucking break, you French bastards. Anyway, what's going on, guys?
It wouldn't have been Lee's punk ass that needed saving. It was frickin' Jefferson Davis.
Well, the Pope saved him, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, here's your petticoat, no problem.
Oh, that is a fargan fucking lie, and you fucking know it.
He had a petticoat on. Don't even try that one.
Oh, don't even. No, that was bullshit. They're fucking drawing him in a dress and shit. Like,
Did I say dress? I said petticoat. Don't confuse the two.
Why? Why not? The Union fucking did for how many years? How long has that story been going on? Ever since it happened? You would run too if you were the fucking president of the rebel states.
We'll get to that part where the truth will come out.
You said you were weak today, so I figure right now is the time for the gut punches. I have a chance. Okay, MC, you know how we do this. Go ahead and set the stage for us. Let's start talking about the Confederate Navy.
Okay, there's several things that are happening right now at this stage of the war. First of all, the United States Navy has imposed a blockade around all of the major southern ports and throughout most of the South in general. This was obviously not a perfect system because of people trying to run the blockade. The Confederacy had been attempting to get Great Britain to declare that the blockade being illegal for two reasons. First of all, because it wasn't perfect, and second of all, because it was considered an act of war, etc. Right.
Wait a minute. No. It was considered an act of war. It is considered an act of war. Last night, I was bullshitting about, what I think Trump should do in the Korean Peninsula. And I said he should take over the Strait of Hormuz. If he does that, that is an act of war. So it is still considered an act of war to blockade a country.
Technically, there are a lot of gray areas with that. All right. And it's been that way historically. Great Britain has constantly used blockades throughout its entire, existence, right? And so, one of the problems with getting Great Britain to see it from the southern point of view is the fact that the same thing, whatever rule gets applied, then Great Britain would have to respect that rule. And being the naval power that it wasn't about to do that.
Well, I do believe Great Britain could have recognized the Confederacy. They had supervisors and people within the Confederate Army actually observing. I guess observer would be a better word for it. And actually seeing what was going on, and they were talking about recognizing the Confederacy. But then the Gettysburg Address happened, and that put the kibosh on that shit. But that's not what we're talking about today. But I did want to bring up.
Was it the Gettysburg Address?
Oh no, it was the Emancipation Proclamation. Sorry. Excuse me. Maybe I'm a little weak today too, so these body blows will go back and forth.
But anyway, go ahead, Forty.
Well, observers during wartime is quite a common occurrence, though, isn't it? Just having observers on either side or something.
At this point in the of the world, yeah, actually it is. Having neutral, quote unquote, neutral observers from foreign militaries come in, military attaches come in to observe certain things, is a standard practice for all the European powers, and actually, it's something that immediately goes into effect once the Meiji Restoration happens in Japan, and Japan starts to do the exact same thing, and you find that Japan sends their military attaches to a number of different areas around the world that are in conflict. And the purpose for doing this, quite frankly, is one, to identify, it's the first real attempt at an identification of rules of war, all right, as to whether or not one side is, a true military, or are they acting as barbarians. The other reason, of course, is that whatever military techniques are applied and whatever new weapon systems come out, well, your military attaché is there to see, how effective it is, how they can be better utilized to integrate into their own militaries, right? So they're basically acting as spies for their foreign countries as well. Now, this is something that's kind of like open spies. All right. I mean,
yeah, but I thought it was more like an ambassador actually showing up, because they actually did political talks with Jefferson Davis. There was some attempt to bring Britain into the war, and if Britain would have came into the war, I don't think it would have ended how it did.
Yeah, it would have ended with Great Britain in even more trouble than it already was. You forget that Great Britain had already numerous issues going on around the world. Right? Mm-hmm. They had just had the 58 rebellion in India. Okay, you had this is gearing toward the Crimea crisis. If I'm not mistaken, right, Jensen?
Yes, sounds about the same sort of timeline. I agree. Though I would actually like to point out, apparently the US actually was preparing to declare war on the UK over this situation. Did you know that?
Not really. There was a small attempt where several of them said, "Let's go ahead and try and declare war," especially after the Britain made a big deal about the seizing of the Confederate ambassadors on a British ship.
Yes,
and Lincoln basically said one war at a time, so he ordered them released and to carry it on. So
he may be a tyrant, but he's not as dumb as Hitler. I gotcha.
He wasn't a tyrant. Your words are ill chosen.
Yeah, sic semper tyrannis.
Keep it up.
Let's go to Ford's Theater, buddy. You want to go hang out, watch a play?
Jesus.
Keep it up.
I think one other thing that's notable is that the British at this time were not really in a position to go to war with the United States, or at least the northern part of the United States at this time. I mean, there were also plenty of conflicts, economic conflicts, primarily between them and the Russians at the time as well. So they'd be fighting a war on two fronts, metaphorically speaking.
With of course their standard enemy being France, ready to jump in on the wrong side whenever they so chose.
Okay, so what you're saying though is if the British would have recognized the Confederacy, which they were almost ready to do, by my reading of it, Jensen, am I wrong?
Well, from what I'm seeing, based on this Trent affair, which is the HMS Trent, which was the ship that was carrying two Confederate diplomats to discuss the situation. That seemed to be the thing that got us about as close to active violence with the Union at that point, I would say. Apparently, the envoys were going towards Britain and France to press the Confederates' case for diplomatic recognition and to lobby for possible financial and military support.
And also, before we went on air, you were talking about how the British shipyards actually built two Confederate warships.
Yes, unfortunately, they only name one of them at this point. The dockyards were John Laird and Sons in the Wirral, which is opposite Liverpool. Apparently, the construction was arranged by a Confederate agent, Commander James Bullock, who led the procurement of sorely needed ships for the fledgling Confederate States Navy.
Yeah, I know, and I would like to point out as well that the Confederate Secret Service, or pretty much their CIA, was operating out of Montreal at the time. So, which was a British, obviously a British territory. So it's kind of obvious who the British were siding with at the beginning of the war, at least. Once the Emancipation Proclamation comes out, which actually freed no slaves, by the way, I would like to point that out. It didn't free a goddamn person. But anyway, as soon as that happened, diplomatically, the British couldn't recognize the South and side with them. They just couldn't.
We will discuss that because that's an old saw that is somewhat inaccurate.
Fair enough. We're here to talk about the Navy today. I just wanted to point out the British support that actually happened, as well as the British selling the Confederate supplies out of the Caribbean when they would run the blockade, I guess, as they called it. I don't want to missay, because you'll fucking call me out on it.
The problem with the Confederacy at this point in running the blockade is, okay, you need arms and armaments, all right, but the reality is you needed far more. While getting guns, getting gunpowder, was something that did happen from time to time, although in limited fashion. The biggest need that the South had was steel. Biggest need they had was iron ore, right? And they just never had enough. And this hampers the construction of the ironclads that are being built. Okay, many of the ironclads, like the CSS Georgia, okay, ended up using old rails, all right, interlocked to create the ironclad type of environment for them to work with it. And the CSS Georgia was never what was built. It eventually basically just becomes a floating armored platform in the river, the Savannah River, to protect Savannah. And the main reason why is simply because the ship itself was all right. And you're gonna see this through many things. Unlike the Merrimack, right, which was actually very well founded.
Yeah, the CSS Virginia is what you're talking
CSS
about.
Virginia, I'm sorry. The CSS Virginia was built by the shipyards in Norfolk. All right. These were true shipwrights. They knew how to build ships. The outer hull of the Merrimack is basically burned, but it doesn't burn below the waterline, which allows the Confederacy to use the hull and create the ironclad, the CSS Virginia. And while they're building it, they know how to build the engines. They know how to build the steering. They know all about this. They have sailors there. This is one of the things that hampers, of course, the Georgia is it's not able to steer correctly because they just didn't have the knowledge on how to build it that they had in the Norfolk shipyards, right, and how to do these things right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the officers that defected to the Confederacy, most of them are infantry or cavalry or artillerymen. There's not very many Navy men that actually defect, so they really have a shortage there.
Yes, the dock workers in Virginia are important. Now, what's been happening, of course, is as the CSS Virginia is being worked on, right? Everybody knows it's being worked on because it's freaking across the river from the DC. All right, this is the same problem. So this panics, of course, the North, and Washington then calls out for, I want to see plans to counter this threat. They decide to hire an interesting individual who's the one who's instrumental in building the monitor. All right, he is an immigrant from Sweden. His designs are quite radical. All right, he's not happy with the Navy Department at the beginning simply because he thinks the Navy Department has screwed him over in the past, but he does win the contract, and he begins work on the monitor. And
Oh, so when I use my time machine, I kill him also. All right. What was his name again?
What's his name? That's a good question. I forgot. His name is escaping me at the moment. Just let me look it up here real quick.
Something along the lines of Abdul.
No, it's not. It's not Abdul.
Yeah. No. Okay. So while you're looking that up, I mean, okay, the Confederacy was able to run the blockade. And how they did it was in small ships, and they would just go at night and sneak through. The thing is, though, most of the ships doing the blockade were wooden. Why didn't the Confederacy try to break the blockade by actually burning the motherfucker ships? Like,
how are you gonna get there to burn them? And
well, you're running through the blockade already. Like, fucking throw a Molotov cocktail or some shit.
The man's name is Erickson. Okay, so you start coming upon a ship, with fire, like a fire ship. What's to prevent the Navy from sinking that ship before it gets close?
Fair point. I'm just saying something, man. Sneak up. Do some fucking Black Ops shit. Like, where's the Navy SEALs when you need them? We need SEAL Team 6 right now.
I was just about to ask, would this be an appropriate time to bring up the Hunley?
Yes, go ahead, 40 ounce. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the Hunley, from what I can see, is, I mean, it appears to be built for just that. I mean, it was literally the H.O. Hunley was literally just it was a Confederate States of America submarine. And it was launched in July 1863. So, and it was in service from 64, and it went out of service the same year, it appears. So, yeah, I mean, why didn't they?
All right.
yeah, that's one way. So, why didn't they use this for any of those Black Ops operations?
Well, they did. The Hunley was the first successful submarine attack. It actually did take out a U.S. warship, all right, and sink it. However, in that attack, it itself was destroyed as well. Now, one of the things people don't realize, and they didn't realize at this point in the world, was they had learned that oxygen was obviously necessary to breathe. Okay, what they didn't know was that the percentage of oxygen can be fine, but if you have too much carbon dioxide, you still die. So even if there's still oxygen to burn, your body will not be able to replace the oxygen fast enough, because it starts to take in and is not able to expel enough carbon dioxide, all right, out of it, and as a result, they died. All right, they had realized at this point that obviously oxygen was important, and they did calculations to ensure, right, that the amount of oxygen, all right, was going to be adequate. Okay, and the way they did that was actually fairly simple. I mean, you can just determine how much oxygen is in any kind of sample by just doing a simple expedient of lighting the candle, and if you put it over a glass with water at the bottom of it, you'll see it suck up to a certain point as it consumes all the oxygen, right, and turns it into carbon dioxide, right? And you'll find that approximately 20% is oxygen, right? So you can have 10% oxygen in like a oxygen helium mixture, right, and you'll breathe fine. But if you get anything over 4% carbon dioxide in that same mix, you will not survive.
Well, no, and you can continue here in a second. I'm looking at the chat here. Penoid, what's up? Didn't know you were really into ironclads, man. If you got something to say about it, links in my Discord. Um, okay, so the Shepherd historian says the Confederate States of America's main tactic was passive aggression against actions against the U.S. Navy. They would steal a bunch of the Yankee ships, and General Beauregard did a daring sea attack to try to unblock a southern port. I'm not sure which port you're referring to. If you remember it, throw it in the chat, and I'll bring that up. But yeah, the Confederacy did try to break the blockade. They did try to fight along the Mississippi River. It's just they never had, I don't know, the resources, as MC is saying, especially when it comes to like the ironclads. And if you look at the comparison between the CSS Virginia and what was the Union ship? I always forget the Yankee shit.
The Monitor.
Okay, the Virginia was barely above water, like really, and like when they were doing cannon fucking barrages back and forth, that shit rang like a bell. Half of those guys got fucking deaf, you know, serving on that ship. The shit was insane. Like, could you imagine a cannonball just hitting the fucking side of your ship and it bounces off, but then it just rings like a bell?
The main attack, all right, that was planned for the Virginia actually was a ramming. They had a ram, an iron prow at the front of the ship where they could ram a ship, all right, and then pull back. It's back to the old style days of
Greek triremes.
You know,
yeah, it's a battle of Salamis.
and if you can't, obviously, if you have to get it where it's weakest, if you can get it under the water line, right, ships will sink. And it was an effective technique for the most part. It did ride low in the water, as you said. It didn't ride as low as the Monitor did, but it did ride low in the water. Now, from the time that the commission happened, all right, where they gave John Erickson, the inventor of the Merrimack, the commission, to the time that it came down the dock, right? He did all of that in 100 days. He basically put a revolutionary ship, from plans to in the water in 100 days. We could never do something like that today.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing feat. Especially considering this submarine here, the Hunley, was apparently extremely ineffective. It was, or at least it was ineffective in its operation. So,
well, it was effective in its attack. It just never came back from the attack.
Yeah,
well, they died in that attack, but it was successful.
Yeah, but to be fair, show me a Union submarine. Oh, you can't. Okay. Anyway, moving on.
Show me a Confederate submarine that returned to port.
Okay, all right. You got me there.
They were all the Hunley, all the people that were a part of it. All right, were volunteers. It was propelled with a propeller. All right, cranked by human hands. They basically had a crankshaft that they themselves turned. The people themselves turned. While the one person looked at out basically the top, they would come up, surface for a bit at the top, and then that would be guided that way.
Yeah. The plans here looks like it's a 2, 4, 6, 9-man crew. So you have 8 people cranking this little shaft, and there are 2 propellers on either side of it. On the, what would that be? The oh god, the port and stern.
Yeah, go ahead and share your link if you don't mind. We'll put it up so that the people can see what you're looking at.
Yeah. Let me put it up for you guys. Okay, so this is a top-down view here at the top. The port, I believe that is. There's a little propeller right here, propeller on the stern, and then on the.
No, yeah, those are not propellers. Those are planes. Those are diving planes.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I see. Okay. It works kind of like the those little flaps on the end of a airplane or something along those lines.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so here's the crankshaft that people will sit and they will literally crank. As you can see, you have your 8 men cranking, they're cranking it really hard.
Yeah, those
your
poor
propeller.
fuckers. Like, god damn it! Like, you get picked for that job, you're like, really, really? Like, I don't want to fucking do this.
They were all volunteers.
Yeah, and I mean, this is this really is quite an amazing feat if you really think about it, because you have 8 men here sitting cranking on this shaft attached to a tiny propeller that is pushing this giant lump of iron with a torpedo attached to the front. And you have to dive and continuously resurface for oxygen. I mean, that must be a hell of a task. I couldn't imagine doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even the fact that they attempted it, I think, is amazing. Especially when you think of the industrial strength of the South, it wasn't much, and they actually they were getting desperate in '63. I mean, look at this shit. Like, god damn.
Yeah,
Well,
and
it is an innovative design, though. I mean, when you really look at it.
yeah, it is. It's primitive, but it is pretty damn amazing. That's for sure. So this thing right here, this little stick that it has glued to its forehead or whatever, this is essentially like from what I can gather, it's basically a one-shot torpedo. So what they did is when they attacked the I totally forgot the name of the ship that they were attacking. It was like the Housatonic, I believe is how that's pronounced. But they were very desperate to break this blockade on a port city, and so they launched the ship, or submarine rather, out of port. And it appears they decided to ram the ship instead. So the torpedo hit the ship, and it basically blew everyone up. So I don't know if that was a misfire, if that was an accident, or what was going on.
Housatonic.
Housatonic. All right, there we are.
Well, the idea behind this, all right, is you're supposed to hit the enemy ship with it, right, and it sticks to the side under the water line of the enemy ship, and then they pull back, they pull away, they start to return, and then the rope pulls to a certain point where it releases the charge and the charge goes off.
Oh, I see.
An overexcited sticky hand grenade.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
like it's kind of like the early version of a poorly designed limpet mine.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could say poorly designed again.
No, I mean, there are things that people had yet to learn, like water static shock. Okay. They're not aware of the damage that underwater, all right, that an explosion underwater can have on a craft. All right. And there is a lot of debate as to actually what happened to the Hunley, whether or not it was the actual explosion that caused the damage, whether or not they were just overcome with oxygen deficiency and sank due to that, or whether or not they, what exactly happened when they failed, all right, or failed to return. Mm-hmm. They saw the successful attack, but when they didn't come back, nobody knew exactly what had happened. And it's only recently that they actually discovered the remains of the Hunley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's a picture dated 2005. Sorry.
Yeah.
So it looks as if this. I can't quite tell if this is them taking sections of it apart or if this is how it was brought up to the surface. Has there been any kind of not footage, but pictures of its initial discovery underwater? Like, was it initially discovered in pieces, or was it discovered intact?
No, it's more or less intact. What you're seeing, you can see where one of the hand cranks was. That the person's right there. That person's coming outside of it. So you can see just how crammed this little tube is that you're in when you're going to go out there to attack a warship off the coast.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know, and I'm looking, like, his head's sticking out the top, and he's sitting down. Did they pilot this with midgets?
I suspect that if you were too tall, you probably weren't allowed to go into the craft. That's probably true.
What you're telling me is the Hobbit Navy, right?
Oh, here's a good view of it. It looks like they have it kind of submerged in the capsule to try and help maybe preserve it or something.
Yeah, to stave off any further deterioration.
Yeah. So it looks as though they took off some of these pieces so you can get inside. It doesn't look like it suffered any damage, or at least not from what I can see. So if I had to take an estimated or educated guess,
you're only looking at part of it, though. That's the problem.
Oh, was it much bigger than this?
Well, you're looking at, I think, the forward end, right? Where's the propeller end?
That's a good question. I don't see a propeller, and if you look back at the schematics, I mean, where was it? Here it is. Yeah, the end should not, or the ends are rather pointed, but there isn't a propeller. So you're right. That must be with the forwardmost fucking bow. I think that would be the front part of the ship.
The bow versus the stern.
Yeah, I can't remember. Port. I can remember left and right, kind of, but not.
Oh no, bow and aft. I'm sorry, the aft of the ship.
So, was this made at the Norfolk shipyards before they were sacked? I don't think so, right? It was made in '63. So, where exactly did they launch this from? And in the chat, real quick, the Shepherd historian answered me. He said Charleston Harbor. He managed to obtain a Yankee ship after the battle, unblocked the port for a few days, managed to send a message to Spain, but the Yankees blocked it soon after. So, yeah.
No, it comes down to the. I don't know if this was in Virginia. Where was the Hunley launch from?
Let me see. It should most definitely say it. John Lardon's Sons Company, Alabama.
Yeah, this is Mobile, Alabama.
John Laird and Sons is, for want of a better, Liverpool.
Oh, okay.
It was developed in Mobile, Alabama, and shipped by rail to
Charleston. No, you're looking at the CSS Alabama right now, 40.
Yeah. Wait, am I? Oh, gosh,
it was built in Mobile, Alabama, in July of 1863, then shipped by rail in August 12th to 1863 to Charleston.
Yeah, can you imagine that going down the train yard? That'd be fucking interesting. You're like, what the fuck is that thing? Especially back then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it would have been interesting. The fact that they even attempted it and actually moved it along. It was this is a 40 feet long, approximately, and it was supposed to, basically porpoise up and down, right? So they could make sure they were on attack. The attack took place on October 15th, 1863. It was a successful attack. However, they didn't come back.
Well, to be fair, neither did the guys in the fucking pedal-driven submarine during the Revolutionary War, right? They died too.
Oh, the guy in the turtle?
Yeah.
No, the key came back. That was just a totally unsuccessful attack, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, then we win. We had a better attack.
It was the first successful attack by a submersible. And unlike the turtle, the Hunley was fully submersible. You could go all the way down. In the attack, of course, it killed all of the second crew, including Hunley himself, who was aboard the ship.
Oh, no shit. Like, the dude it's named after was fucking in. He was probably steering the motherfucker. It's probably his fault.
You blame one of your own people who was designing a warship to protect you for killing everybody.
Yeah. I just shoved him in front of the subway. Fuck this.
What an ass, man. You're horrible.
Yeah, I know. I tried.
Anyway, after in the race with the ironclads, right? The Monitor comes down, to as it's coming down to stop and blockade the CSS Virginia. The Virginia comes out and makes its first foray and attacks, and it is very devastating. It destroys, for all intents and purposes, it destroys 2 Union warships outright. All right, and grounds a third.
Holy crap!
In the first day, and then it retires from that day because it's getting late in the day. So it retires, and it's gonna finish the job for the blockade, right, the next day. During that night, however, the Monitor arrives and positions itself in between the Virginia and the I believe it's the USS Congress, which has been run aground. Either the Congress or the Minnesota. I don't remember exactly which U.S. ship it was.
Well, yeah, you're right. And if I was the captain of the Virginia, I would not have stopped that night. Fuck it, dude. Like, I don't know, fucking figure it out. Just keep fucking shooting. I don't care. Finish it off.
You have okay. You got to remember something. You can't. What are you going to finish off? Right? I mean, you're not expecting anything to happen. Nobody knows that the Monitor's on its way. I mean, for crying out loud, like I said, they went from plans to a working device in 100 days. Nobody expects that kind of speed. Nobody. All right. There are 47 separate patentable inventions on the Monitor, to include the turret, which is brand new. The Virginia had 8 to 10 guns, I believe. There was just 2 on the Monitor.
Yeah, but it was able, like you said, the turret, it was able to shift and go almost rapid fire. While they're reloading one and the other is shooting, and that was amazing. Yeah,
they can fire, and they can fire from any direction. They can rotate to fire from any direction. They don't have to be stern on. They don't have to be broadside. They could continue to fire all the way around.
Where the Virginia couldn't do that, it had to be a broadside, pretty much.
Well, they had. I think they had a gun in the front, 1 gun in front, 1 gun aft, and 4 guns on either side. So I think it was a 10-gun ship.
Right? But to be fair though, they stood toe to toe for what, 5 hours? Just shooting at each other. They
basically were going toe to toe, back and forth at each other. And as in one of the more dramatic events, all right, the Virginia grounds itself. Okay, because the thing about the bomb.
Are you still there? You broke up a little bit on me. Jensen, can you hear me, or is my internet fucking up?
I'm doing fine, mate.
Okay, all right. Yeah, MC, you broke up a little bit there, but you were right in the middle of your sentence. Go ahead if you're back.
During the battle, the CSS Virginia is grounded on a sandbar.
Is this when they had to scuttle the ship? Because they do end up scuttling the ship. Okay, MC, do you want to F5 real quick? I'm not sure what's going on, but you keep disappearing. Jensen, you can still hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Everything's fine.
While MC fixes his issues, let's go back to the British connection. Are you as optimistic as I was earlier when I was talking about how the British were about a cunt hairs away from joining the war in favor of the Confederacy?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, just a second. I want Jensen to answer this question and then go right back to what you were talking about.
Well, I personally feel that the British were actually quite strong in feeling towards helping you guys out. But from what I've read, it was actually only the elites in Britain that were interested in that. The common people were actually generally supportive of the USA. Apparently it was just those with the money that actually gave a shit about the Confederacy. Though, in all fairness, it makes perfect sense. Let's be honest.
Well, no, it does. Well, it does make perfect sense, and not to cut you off. Sorry, Jensen, but it was mainly the cotton exports that they were interested in. That's what the South was trading for, to get the guns and the gunpowder and the food and what have you. Although you guys should have gave us some damn shoes. Just throwing that out there. God damn it.
Well, apparently, we financed blockade runners that sent munitions and luxuries to the Confederate ports in return for cotton and tobacco. That should give you the idea of what was traded.
Yeah, exactly. And MC, you are back. I heard you perfectly fine. Go for it.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize for the poor connection. No, the CSS Virginia has run aground. Okay, and while it's run aground that it is now very vulnerable, because now the monitor can maneuver basically in a position, all right, and just pound the holy crap out of the CSS Virginia without it ever being able to return fire. And while it's maneuvering to do that, the commander sits up there and revs the engines past where they're supposed to go, right? All right, in an attempt to dislodge. And he is successful. He is able to dislodge the CSS Virginia, although his number one weapon, which was that ram, has now been broken. All right, and so that now it's basically back and forth guns again. The smokestacks are basically shot off from both ships. This is creating intolerable conditions because the smoke is inside of the ships and everything else. It's just you're dealing with steam engines at the time, the early steam engines, right? And these smokestacks in a steam engine actually served an interesting purpose, and that is it kind of served as a pressure valve. All right, to keep up a certain amount of pressure within those engines, and once those were shot away, the pressure would drop as a result. So the amount of steam power that you had to maneuver and everything drastically went down. All right. So as a result of all this, the Virginia basically retires and says, "Okay, we're going to retire for the day," but in essence.
You were at in essence, and then you cut off again. 40 and Jensen, you can still hear me, right? It's not me cutting off.
Fine. No, it's definitely MC.
Okay, yeah. I gotta make sure because you know how shitty my internet is. I gotta make sure it's not. This stream ain't gonna fucking die on me. Okay, so 40 ounce.
Yes.
What do you think? I don't know if you have the page pulled up he was talking about, but that was an interesting battle, and he's right. The ram did get broken off. I thought maybe that was when they ran aground and scuttled the ship, but that comes later because they do end up scuttling the Virginia. The Virginia just gets torn apart. That way the Yankees can't use it, and they fucking leave it. And that's pretty much the end of the Confederate Navy, at least within the blockade zone. The Confederate Navy will raid in other places, which is why Jensen is here. We're going to talk about that. But at that point, the Confederate Navy is pretty much toast. But until then, I mean, could you imagine actually being in that fucking ironclad when that shit's like it's ringing like a bell? It's full of fucking smoke. You got to keep loading and firing, and you don't know if you're going to live or die. Like, that shit sounds fucking intense.
Yeah, especially when your smokestack is blown off, like you said. I didn't realize the smokestack served a purpose for keeping the pressurizing the engines and everything. So you're essentially sitting in a giant chunk of iron, and you can move, but you can't move as fast as you would want to. So you can't turn on a dime, or turning on a dime as far as a ship can turn on a dime, I suppose. You lose all mobility, you lose all speed, and you're sitting in a chunk of iron that seems rather safe, but safe for how long? That's to be determined by how many cannonballs hit your chunk of iron, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me again?
Yeah, we can. And actually, I have a question, MC. Do you know how thick the iron plating was? Because that's a really interesting thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask that as well.
The iron on which ship?
The Virginia.
I think there was 2-inch iron plate around it.
Really?
Now the Virginia is not using the technique that they used for the Georgia, which was using basically railroad ties, all right, back and forth in a layered type of environment. The ironclad for the Virginia was actual iron plate.
Okay. So when it's facing down the was it the USS Merrimack? Was that the ship it was going up? I forgot the name.
Monitor.
Oh, okay. So what was the Virginia being bombarded with? Like, what was the pounders in terms of the kind of fire it was taking?
The monitor guns.
Yeah.
Let me look that up again before I think I know what it is, but I don't want to make a mistake.
Well, no, actually, yeah, we need to try and get our facts right because actually, Sherardi lets her kid listen to this show because we do talk history the whole time. So yeah, we might want to get our facts straight.
Basically, they were 15-pound guns. These are big, frickin' guns.
Oh wow. And I'm looking at the USS Virginia, and it says they got 12 pounders. So they had two 12-pounders on there, and then they had a bunch of between 160 and 230 millimeter or 229 millimeters. So it's strong. It's like a tank if you ever play video games. It's got a lot of HP, but it doesn't do a lot of damage. So
I know. Are they using scatter shot or are they using solid ball?
No, they're using solid ball against one another. And during the battle, all right, because really the only thing that the Virginia can shoot at, aside from the smokestack, which they blow away, is that big round, cheese box top, which is what's basically just above the water. The monitor sits so low in the water, it literally is only less than a foot of water or between the top of the ship, all right, to where the water level is, with the exception of that turret.
If they didn't get stuck on the sandbar and have to break the ram to get off of it, could the ram have worked against the monitor? Could they have literally just did old school Greek fucking warfare and rammed this fucker at full speed?
They could have rammed it. Whether or not it would have penetrated the armor would remain to be seen. But if they, for example, hit the aft where the propellers were, they definitely could have damaged the rudders or damaged the propellers. In which case, they could have won it from that standpoint. Whether it would have actually punched a hole in the ship, well, we don't know. It theoretically could have. All right, we just don't know.
Do you think it was more that the captains didn't really know how to fight this type of battle yet?
No,
and
I think it's just a matter of. I think it's just a matter of maneuver back and forth across this with two new ships. You got to remember that while we're talking about the Virginia was not very mobile either when it came right down to it. Right. Rings around it very easily because it was slow and unwieldy. I mean, because it's a heavy frickin' ship. For all intents and purposes, the way we would look at it today, it was woefully underpowered. Although it was able to do what it needed to at the time. All right. These ships are basically lumbering masses of frickin' steel and iron shooting at one another.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at their statistics, would you call it? Looking at just like the armor that's built onto the Virginia and the Monitor, I mean, the Monitor seems to be far superior. I mean, you're talking about, in some cases, 3 to 5 inches worth of iron and steel. You're talking about an armament where they're using, 280 millimeter smoothbore, essentially giant cannons. And the CSS Virginia is also well armored, although not to the same degree. And its armaments are more varied. It has more guns on it, but they're definitely not going to hit as hard as that 280 millimeter.
Well, right. And so basically, some of the plates are being damaged. Like I said, during the battle, the smokestacks are shot away. Here's a let me try and share something with you guys. Here's an interesting picture of these systems. All right, and you can see just how much lower in the water all right, that the Hunley, the Monitor was compared to the Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This doesn't, unfortunately, just shows just a little bit of the prow right here. Right? I don't know if you can see my cursor moving or not. All right. This is actually much more extensive than really what the picture indicates. Right. For the ram. Right. This is basically.
I had to get up and do something for my kid. You're looking at the Virginia, right?
This is the Virginia right here, and this is the Monitor right next to it.
Oh, okay. All right. I got you. So the Monitor didn't do the RAM thing. They went more with the turret.
No, they just,
as their main
just
aspect.
had the turret cut. All right. I mean, it was just an out and out slugfest. All right. The Virginia is basically retires at the end of this battle. It retires for the day and it never comes out again. Now, while it never comes out to threaten the ships themselves, the blockade ships themselves, it does prevent, all right, the Union forces from running ships up and down the James River. All right. So it is effective as a deterrent, and the Union remains leery of the Virginia up until the point where it gets destroyed, which is just a few months later.
Yeah, no, and we're gonna end up getting to that. But let me see if I can do this. No, actually, I'm gonna ask one of you guys. Jensen, you're already on the wiki page or whatever. Find out the number of blockade runners that the Confederacy used that we know about. I know we won't know about all of them, obviously, but I do want to talk about the blockade runners a little bit. And if you can find a picture of one of the blockade running ships, because these things were tiny little skiffs, pretty much, that they were using.
Well, while he's doing that, I want people to understand now what has happened. Okay, because of the success of the Monitor, the Union goes on a crash building program, and they start pumping Monitor ships out. There are several of this style that come out almost immediately, and they start to replace the wooden ships as blockade ships all along the ports.
Wow. So, okay. So yeah, I can definitely see why the Virginia was never deployed again. I mean, what if it had to go up against 2 monitors, or 3 monitors? Oh dear God.
Exactly. So now not only are you're outmanned, you're outgunned, and you've only got one ship against obviously a proven design that you struggled with the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still wouldn't have scuttled the Virginia. The Virginia could have been used to before they started to replace these ships. It could have been used to break the blockade down around New Orleans, and maybe used to protect New Orleans. How are you going to
ship it down there?
I don't know. You sail it, I guess. You figure it out. I don't know, man. If that's the only ship
there was no way to sail it.
If that's the only ship you have in your goddamn Navy, you don't give it up, all right? I play fucking strategy games. No, you keep that motherfucker.
Hold on a second. I'm going to
Right.
Like, I mean, okay.
You was asking about the blockade ships. The Confederate naval fleet only consisted of about 35 ships, of which 21 were steam-driven. Is that the sort of information you want, or do you want me to look for something else, mate?
No, that's about it. Okay, so that's why the British didn't help as much as they could have, because the Confederate Navy didn't have enough ships to carry the goods in sea. That was the numbers I was actually looking for. Thank you, Jensen. Because I believe the British would have traded far more. Yes, cotton was getting big in other places as well, so they didn't need the South as much as they did maybe even 10 years before. But, I mean, seriously, if the South had more ships, there would have been more commerce. And there might have been even more incentive to recognize the South. And I'm sorry, the babies are playing right next to me.
I want you to take a look and share this, if you don't mind, on my screen. All right. Now, this is the Peninsula Campaign, which begins basically after the battle between the Merrimack and the CSS Virginia. Right?
Yeah, you know that campaign. You know that campaign where Robert E. Lee whoops your ass. Yeah, I remember this one.
Yeah. Not this part. You don't, because right here at Yorktown, okay, is where the CSS Virginia is. It's protecting all this river here. Okay, once they take the Yorktown, all right, and basically take Norfolk, what other choice do you have? You can't keep going up the river because all of this is under the control, basically, of the Union forces. That's why they frickin' abandoned it and sank it.
Fair enough, man. There's got to be a way to get around Fort Monroe, though. Well, no, because you can get around Fort Monroe and you can head out, and then you have lots of targets to hit.
I'm sorry. Here, it's Newport News is where it is. I'm sorry. It's over here, but that's basically why they had to abandon it. Because once the Union took control of this area, all right, of this peninsula, there was no place for it. All right, it was going to be captured, and you had a choice: either burn it to the ground or give it to the Yankees. Is that what you wanted to do? Give the CSS Virginia to the Yankees?
Fuck no. Hell no.
Okay.
In fact, I'm unbolting those guns and fucking giving them to fucking Jackson. That's what I'm fucking doing. But you know.
Where's Jackson at this time?
He's in the Shenandoah Valley.
And how are you going to ship the guns there?
we still have rail lines.
You got the magical Confederate teleporter working?
I got the fucking DeLorean fired up, brother. Ready to go. Oh shit. Okay, no, I get your point, man. But scuttling it was, I don't know. I still think it might not have been captured if it went up the river because you're looking at mostly wooden boats at that point. You only have one Merrimack at this section, so I mean, really, you could still use the Virginia to actually disrupt the trade lines and their access to that river.
It would have to be okay. Now, understand, the battles are taking places in rivers because neither one of these two ships are really quote unquote seaworthy. All right. They're not something you're going to sail across the Atlantic in. They're not. That's not what they're built for, and they have no ability to do that.
Oh, I would. I'm sailing to Jensen's house in that bitch. Anyway, go ahead.
You're sinking to the bottom of the Atlantic in that bitch. Is what you're going to do if you try to sail across the Atlantic.
Oh God. So, my question would be: there's absolutely no way they could have gotten the Virginia out of York. Was the Monitor still sitting outside, waiting for them to make the wrong move?
Yep.
Or did they produce more Monitors at this time? Or?
Oh yeah, they're shipping them out, pumping them out one or two a month.
1 or 2 a month. Wow. Holy crap. Okay.
Once you build the first one, I mean, it makes it a lot easier when you know what you're doing to build the second, and the third, and the fourth. All right, none of them were really seaworthy, but they begin to replace all the wooden ships along the coast. And because of the turreted design and everything, all of this, all right, changes the entire design of the navies around the world, especially in Great Britain. Great Britain's response to this is the HMS Dreadnought. Yeah,
I mean, okay, that makes sense why they scuttled it then, because that was not necessarily making sense to me. Because when he said the Virginia had retired, I was under the assumption that, I mean, because these are two massive ironclads that we're talking about. I was under the assumption that the Monitor had taken a fair amount of damage as well, and maybe retired for a short time to get repairs. So it didn't necessarily make sense why they had retired the Virginia permanently to the bottom of the river.
Well, when I say retired, I mean they went back to their port, and past the defenses and so forth. But the Monitor stayed on station until it was relieved. The Monitor's fate is they're attempting to ship it south, and it gets caught in a storm and actually sinks later on.
Oh.
And they got pictures of it off the North Carolina coast. They've actually found it, and I'm bringing up pieces of the Monitor.
Oh, that's cool.
So I mean, these are all things that people have discovered fairly recently, over the
Well, no, Dade says in the chat, and welcome, fucking. I guess I'll call you Dade. I'm used to you being Zero, asshole. So the artist formerly known as Zero Cool, says in the chat, why would the British help us? They were pissed at us. They were pissed at the Yankees, though. So they would they already did. They were helping us throughout the war, and the Confederate Secret Service was based out of Montreal, which was a British Commonwealth. So, I mean, they were helping the Confederacy throughout the war.
Then why are you bitching about it?
Because if they would have invaded from Canada, the South would have won. I'm just saying. Why didn't you throw those Canadians at the fucking Yankees, Jensen? What
Do you
the fuck?
realize what would have happened if the British would have invaded?
The French would have joined the war on your guys' side. It would have been a world war.
I wouldn't have worried about the French warring, right? You got to remember that the Union wasn't pulling out full stops in the Civil War. You act like the Union was teetering.
They weren't pulling out full stops. What about fucking Sherman and Georgia? We'll get to that, dude. That's what we're really going to fucking argue.
The economic power and the economic might that the Union had. You got to remember, this was not necessarily a very popular war. If you'd have seen an invasion by the British in the north, you would have seen even a far faster ramp up of the material support for the war. And you would have saw an instant rise, almost immediate rise. You'd have seen the rise of double or triple the size of the Union Army would have happened in a month or less.
I hate to say it, but he's right, man.
Well, is he right? Because if you're fighting a war on two fronts, that didn't work very well for a certain gentleman with a mustache.
Well,
the problem that you're dealing with right now is where are the Canadians going to get their supplies? They don't have anything.
No, where are you?
Hold on a second. I'm trying to explain this, Mad Dodge. Where are they going to?
Fucking Jackson, dude. You got your butt whooped by this inferior force that split its fucking army in half, and it almost fucking wiped you out.
Didn't almost wipe out anything. And this is
ran
something
back
that
to fucking DC.
You keep coming back
fucking
there.
ran with your tails between your legs.
Whether when people retreat.
Don't give me this shit.
Well, really?
Second,
and what happened? And what happened to Jackson?
What about Sharpsburg?
All right.
Hey, Antietam was pretty bloody. Nobody came out of that fight very good.
Yeah. Really? Tell me, what did Lee do at there?
We weren't trying to take over the government. We wanted to be left alone. That's all you have to do.
He ran back south with his tail between his legs.
Out the 7 days. Who ran then, bitch?
Hey, but we had bad generals.
Yeah.
Who's stumbling down? We had bad generals, but it wasn't Grant, was it?
Fuck Grant, the fucking butcher, and his psycho fucking Fred Sherman.
You get right back to this about how bitter you were, and you're going to talk about how freaking wonderful Jackson was, and what was Jackson known for? Oh, look at this beautiful field of freaking dead bodies everywhere. Oh, excuse me while I ride into battle with my left hand in the air because I might fall off my freaking horse. No pepper for me. It might freaking poison me. Oh, by the way, I can't write this letter on Saturday because it'd be in the post on Sunday. So let me wait till Monday to actually get the letter. All right, so go back with this bullshit about the the problems of the generalship.
Oh, okay, and you didn't even bring up the cigar.
Jackson's cock.
You didn't even bring up the cigar, so I'll give you a pass here. 40, you're cracking up. Go ahead and jump in. God damn it.
No, I love it. There's just one instance. As he was like, "Oh, well, tell me about General Lee," and you're just like, "Stop oppressing us. We just wanted freedoms."
Ouch.
I just love it. It's like, what about this one battle? Oh, well, what about this battle? Stop. Stop it.
Yeah. Hey, no, I came back with 7 days. I can fight this battle. I can throw blow the blow. Fuck you.
He's trying to relive the glory of the South.
We don't talk about 1865.
Let's get back to the Confederate States Navy, okay?
All right, go ahead, get us back.
All right, let's talk about the building of the two ships. Specifically, Jensen, do you want to take the USS or the CSA Alabama?
Yep, no problem. Well, I'll tell you one thing that's quite frightening about it is its armaments. 6 32-pound cannons, one 110-pound cannon, and one 68-pound cannon. So that's
Oh my god.
yeah. I'm going to put this bluntly: when the British build ships to blow other shit up, we kind of do it pretty hardcore. Let's get blunt here. This thing was an absolute beast with that much firepower, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And it did a hell of a lot of damage.
But it did it outside of the blockade, and that's what bugs me is it didn't even try. Especially, what year did this ship come out, Jensen? Go ahead.
It was laid down in 1862, and it was launched in July 29, 1862.
So we're talking about right around the time when the Monitor and Virginia are fighting, right? I know it takes a long time to sail across the goddamn ocean. I get it. I'm not a fucking idiot. All right.
Well, not at 13 knots as a top speed. It's not. I mean, compared to other ships, holy crap.
But I mean, if it could have showed up and actually backed up the Virginia, not against the ironclad, but actually attacked the wooden ships in the blockade, I think maybe that battle could have gone a little bit different.
I'd accept that. Here's one thing that I do find mildly entertaining is the motto of the Alabama: God helps those who help themselves. I love that.
That is quite the ironic motto.
It is, isn't it?
God helps them who helps themselves. Now help me build this ship.
It came down, the CSA Alabama came down the sloops in or down the shipyards and floating in 62, right? Yep. And then for the next 2 years, okay, it basically made life hell on the seas, right? Yeah. Acting as a commerce raider, right? Interdicting shipping left and right. And if you want to talk about MADD, where the hell were the French? It basically sailed out of a French port generally, right? So don't be whining and crying that the French didn't give you any help, right? They would constantly come back to dry dock and get repairs at French ports. So the French were helping you out as well. They couldn't build ships, but then again, would you trust a French-built ship either?
No, I wouldn't. I'd rather trust the fucking British when it comes to ships. All right, I'm not stupid. But okay, so the French were helping the Confederacy out probably for cotton. I mean, that's the only thing we had then tobacco. Like that's the only thing we had to fucking ship out. So you have the French and the British. Now, if the European powers got involved, do you think the war would have went different? That blockade would have been broken, and more troops would have came in, or at least supplies. I'm not saying the Europeans would have supplied troops.
The blockade would have been broken, but it wouldn't. What it would have caused is general frickin' piracy all along. All shipping back and forth through the Atlantic, right, would have gone up in flames. That's what would have happened. You would have seen basically military ships attacking any frickin' civilian ship that was out there, because if it's flying a French flag, it's going to get attacked by, and they're supporting the U.S. forces, then the British are going to sit up there and attack it. If it's flying, the Americans are going to attack it. I'm not talking warships. I'm talking just the normal, everyday frickin' merchant ships. The merchant ships you would have seen shipping across both to and from the Atlantic come to a standstill. Now, how is that going to help the British, especially when they're having issues specifically with the Russians at this time? And Russia doesn't have a navy at all.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. Sorry, go.
No, I was about to say U40 and Quinn go ahead because me and MC just went back and forth for like 10 minutes. Go for it.
Well, here's something that's vaguely interesting. Did you know that the CSS Alabama actually done quite a bit of its work, work that was done, and it was actually done in the South African Cape Town, South Africa. So yeah, that ship actually got some distance. This thing really did a damn sight of traveling.
Yeah, it was basically the best freaking pirate that the Confederates had.
Yeah, it was, according to this, it was actually designated as a cruiser.
Yes, and you were right about its weaponry. The weaponry it had was massive, right?
Yeah,
And it isn't until it gets basically caught, all right, in Cherbourg Harbor, right, by the Kearsarge,
yeah,
where it is basically sunk. And of course, the Kearsarge, all right, the captain knows that the Alabama is inside of the French port. He basically sends a "Are you afraid to come out and fight me?" Commentary over to the Virginia, basically challenging it. And out comes the Alabama, only to find out that the Kearsarge has plates of iron plates on it. All right, and the battle commences.
That's some fucked up fucking Yankee fucking fuckery right there. They knew damn well the Southerners are gonna be like, "Fuck yeah, we'll come out and fight." Like, god damn it.
And they did, and got sank.
Well,
actually,
I mean,
I should point out, you're saying the Southerner. Apparently, most of the crew was still actually British.
Yes,
Wait.
they were.
Why weren't the British fucking pissed when it sunk then? You should have entered the war at that point. Been like, motherfuckers, this is the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Like,
how is this a Gulf of Tonkin incident? You were already fighting with that ship.
It's not. I'm just fucking with you.
But yeah, the battle began with the Alabama firing first, and after a few exchanges of weaponry, the Alabama is struck numbers of times, and of course, because of the difference in the defensive capabilities of the two ships, the Alabama sinks.
Oh.
How many people died, and how many were able to actually like get to shore or whatever?
Of the Confederate losses was 1 killed and 2 wounded.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't all hands lost.
There was 1 killed, 2 wounded on the Kearsarge. On the Confederates, 19 died, 9 KIA, 10 drowned, 21 wounded, 70 captured.
Damn.
And I'm looking. I mean, that's, oh dear God. I'm looking at
38 escaped and were rescued by a British yacht.
And this is quite amazing. The Alabama fired 370 rounds at her adversary, averaging 1 round a minute per gun. That is an incredible fire rate. Like, that's pretty amazing. So that crew was quite a loss. That's unfortunate. Holy crap.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked at that number, actually. Holy shit.
Yeah, especially considering the number of guns and how massive those guns were. That's quite a formidable firepower.
And that's why the armor plating worked so well. And it was a new thing. I mean, that's what we've been talking about the whole time. There is another ship. Let's see here. I'm on Wikipedia. I know, not the best source in the world. Can't even use it for my school. But the CSS Shenandoah. She was the Sea King, the Shenandoah. She had both names, I guess. She was launched in August 17th of 63, and she was acquired. Okay, so that's why she has 2 names. She was stolen by the Confederates. Recommissioned October 19th in 64, decommissioned November 6th in 65. She was the last Confederate ship actually to surrender, and she had to surrender in Great Britain. because she didn't know the war was over, and her crew was raiding still.
Basically pirating their little merry hearts away.
And
Privateer, sir, privateer. We nothing to do with the British was involved in piracy. They were privateers.
And we're back to the French's Drake excuse for everything. Pirates, there's no pirates here.
We handed out letters of marque. We do not employ pirates. We have professional privateers. Thank you.
Henry Morgan wasn't a pirate. He was a freaking privateer and a governor.
It's not our fault if you guys seem to be confused at the way you were.
Hey, Jensen, can I get a letter of marque? I got some pirating to
do. I was gonna say it's
a British or a servant of the British Empire to get that.
Well, I want my castle back. Does that count?
You know, if you'd like to join us, you know, just let us know. I'll try and put in a good word for you.
Yeah, because you know, all people that live around fucking in Great Britain, they all know the Queen directly, so you can get me in, right?
Yeah, you'll be surprised. You know the whole 7 degrees of separation thing? Yeah, I know people that have quite literally sat on the throne. Not as royals, they weren't technically allowed to.
They never had up there and sat down on the throne.
Just making a little point there. So maybe a good word could be put in for you. That's all I'm saying. Hey, it might get you your castle back.
Nice. But no, I'm looking here. Sorry about that. But okay, so type extreme clipper hull. It was 1,160 tons, 230 feet long. Where is the fucking armament? 4 8-inch, 203 millimeter smoothbore cannons, 2 12-pounders rifled. Wentworth, I don't know if that's like a special brand of cannon. I wouldn't freaking know. And 2 32-pounders. It was pretty well armed, and it was raiding the Pacific. MC, if you want to pull it up and talk a little bit more about it too. I don't want to just read through it. I had kids going through. My daughter has a friend
it's
over.
Quiet at the moment. Go ahead.
But no, okay, all right. The vessel had 3 names and many owners in the lifetime of 9 years. She was an auxiliary composite passenger cargo vessel built in by Alexander Stevens and Sons in Glasgow. Once again, see, the British and the Scottish keep coming up, but you know, you didn't break the blockade, Jensen. That's why I invited you here. This is a lecture on how the British should have intervened in this war, because I keep getting lectured about World War I and World War II.
Why the British did? How come the British didn't save our bacon? How come you didn't save our ass?
Yeah. Well, I keep getting bitched at about World War I and II. Like, I mean, I gotta bitch at somebody.
This is the origin of it all. You want to know why we don't come over there and help you whenever Germany starts rabble rousing? Well, this is why.
Yeah, but more the point, in that case, why aren't the Union over here helping us? If you want to ever go at anyone, you ever got them, they should be the one helping, because after all, we...
Oh, I don't know. Maybe the CSS Alabama has something to say about that.
We didn't build the Alabama.
Yes, you did.
No. We built the ship that became the Alabama.
We built the ship that became the Alabama and staffed it full of sailors. I mean, right?
Again, it's not our fault how it was used.
It's not our fault that our citizens were freaking sailing around shooting at Americans. No big deal.
Well, let's be honest.
Well, only one portion of Americans. They were helping the other portion. Saying.
Normally, you would declare war for that kind of crap, wouldn't you? After you bitched about the fact that we seized 2 freaking Confederate envoys off of the Trent?
Yeah, we're a bit pissed at that, I have to say.
Woohoo. So you're going to sit up there and demand that we sit up there and recognize. Oh, but we're friends now. Yeah. Okay.
It's called diplomacy. It's not. Diplomacy.
Jesus.
Yes, it is called diplomacy. You're right. We're fast. One of the things that we're all joking about here, that so people who are listening don't, so they understand, is the relationship the United States has with the British Isles and Great Britain and Ireland is a lot tighter today, much tighter today than it was back in the 1850s or even in the 1920s and 1930s. And people don't recognize that. They we grew up in a time frame when the British have always been our friends. We've always been allies, all right, for over 100 years, right? But past that time frame, we weren't really always allies. In fact, there were still many Americans that preferred dealing with the French rather than dealing with the British, and they had that attitude all the way back from the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, well, and don't forget the War of 1812 and a certain house that got burnt, Jensen.
Hey, what can I say? It was in the way. It was ruining the look. That's all it was.
It was ruining the look. It did.
He didn't burn down the White House. He burned down the house that was soon to become the White House. That's what it was. Yes.
Actually,
He wanted a new paint scheme. It's not going to be white. It's going to be black and red. Look at the fire.
We're trying to stop a racist incident. What is your problem? We are.
It was a bit cold out. We needed a fire. Sorry. It's warming up.
There you go. And there's you complaining. See, we're just trying. Look, we're just trying to keep the place warm for you guys. What is your problem?
Well, we figured the Germans were trying to help you out in the same way. What's the problem? The firebombing in London. I mean, it's kind of same, right? Same old, same old.
Yeah, it's nice and warm. I'll give it that. Get the old urban renewal. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, Mad, I'll give you something to be a bit annoyed about. How about the fact that the Kearsarge was actually still firing at the Alabama after they had actually put out the white flag? They were continuing to bombard after the Alabama had surrendered.
Because no one could see the freaking white flag.
Either that or they thought it was the first national flag in the Confederacy, because that was a stupid flag. Which I collect flags, and I'm not buying that fucking fucker. It's like it's a white flag, pretty much. Like, what the fuck? No. Why are you designing a white flag as your national flag? Are you France? What is going on here?
It kind of was the national flag at the end of the Confederacy, wasn't it?
Oh. Yeah, I thought you said you were injured today there, Tyson.
He may be injured, but it sounds like he's still kicking your ass, sir.
Thanks for the backup, Jensen. I appreciate it, buddy.
What'd you expect from the Brit?
Yeah,
we'll get you into the fight. Well, that looks like it sucks, doesn't it?
After the fight's over, he'll hand me a beer, though, so that's cool. I'm good with that.
We're all still friends.
Okay, but no, the Savannah, though, it only took one prize in the Indian Ocean. Then it went on to the North Pacific and started to raid the whalers. That's how they ended up not knowing the war was over. They were actually told twice that the war was over, and they didn't believe them. They're like, no, it's fucking not. There's no way that it's over. There's no way we lost. And then it took a British person, probably Jensen's great-great-grandfather here, to be like, hey, guys, it is actually over. And they're like, oh, fuck. Okay, we have to surrender. Do we go to the United States and go surrender there? Fuck no, we've been raiding for 6 months, illegally. And they went and fucking surrendered in Great Britain. It's really interesting. And it was the last actual Confederate to surrender, I believe. Either that or in the Indian Territory came slightly after. But yeah.
Yeah. That's something that's actually quite common. I mean, this happened well into, or it actually did happen in World War One as well. I don't know if it happened in World War Two, but it's actually quite common for raiding to take place even after the wars ended. There was a German admiral who continued raiding British ships in. I'm trying to think of where it was. It might have been somewhere around India, if I remember correctly. But he was raiding ships for, I think, like almost a year after the fact. So that's quite common for ships to kind of go adrift and do their own thing for several months at a time.
That and the fact they still had plenty of schnapps on board, pissed out the head and just blowing it up the behind. Let's be honest here.
There reminds me, oh my gosh, I just watched this episode, the episode of South Park where they get absolutely smashed on s'mores schnapps, and then they do the Civil War reenactment and they go capture they go throughout the South like basically capturing a bunch of towns, and I don't know why I thought of that.
Isn't Cartman Isn't Cartman a Confederate in that episode? I think I've seen that.
Yeah, he's dressed up at Lee and he's like, we have to go take Fort Sumter. And then they take it. Oh gosh, they start the second Civil War because everyone gets hopped up on schnapps. It's good stuff, man.
But yeah, no, the Shenandoah was really an interesting story. Just for the fact that, I mean, it's the last contingent of Confederates to actually surrender. I really do believe so. I mean, my computer sucks, or I would look it up on the spot here and see who surrendered first. The troops in the Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma and stuff like that, or the troops that were on the ship. But yeah, and they had to go surrender to the British. And I don't remember. They might not have ever went back to the United States. They might have stayed in Britain.
Well, you know, they might actually be related to you. That might explain why you got that bloody castle, sir.
Yeah, the castle that they stole and won't give back. Now it's a school. There's a bunch of fucking weird kids in there. Little kids like Nigel and shit like that. Like, I can't have that. I want my castle back. No, but MC, we try to stay on topic on here. It's not really the red eyes. So, what else are we leaving out when it comes to the Confederate Navy? What do you want to add?
Well, the thing about the Confederate Navy is it shows one of the weaknesses of the Confederacy at the beginning of the war, and that is there is no industrial base. All right, they can't produce ships to compete. All right, I mean, they've got more coastline obviously than the North has, actually. All right, quite a bit more, and yet there's no industry there to build the ships to compete in any real type of scenario. And the other thing about this is when I talk about this, people, when they talk about wooden ships, yes, there were wooden ships, but you got to remember you've had the advent of the steam engine. All these ships are basically being powered by steam. All right. Well, what does it take to produce steam? All right. You need a boiler. You need metal. All right. You need industry in order to build the boilers, to build the what's necessary. All right, for these ships to run, and they're all located in the North. There's very little industry in the South. All right. Because for all intents and purposes, the South is an agricultural or an agrarian society. It has almost no industry in comparison. And then put on top of that, not only don't you have the industry, but you don't have the raw material support. You don't have massive supplies of iron that you could start smelting down to build these things. This is why, for example, the CSS Georgia, which I mentioned earlier, right, is basically an ironclad. Yeah, but what they did is they interlocked railroad ties back and forth across it to create the ironclad environment, because they don't have the iron. They just simply don't have the steel. And yes, you're getting weapons and you're getting gunpowder being traded from the British, but you're not getting, plates of steel. You're not getting, raw material that's going to be necessary to carry on an industrial war, which is what the Civil War actually was.
Mhm.
The War of Northern Aggression. But anyway, I do want to know.
It is the Civil War, and you lost.
Okay. I'll bend here. The war between the states. Does that work? Anyway, what weren't the British selling the Confederacy hard materials? Jensen, do you have any knowledge on that? Because I mean, that would be something that they would have wanted, right? Is it just because the ships that they were using to run the blockades weren't big enough?
Well, yeah. How are you going to get the amount of supplies? I'm sorry for interrupting, Jensen, but it really,
Hello.
when you're talking raw materials, you're talking, huge container ships. You're not talking, I can deliver how many guns versus a ton of steel. All right. The difference in the size and that's going to be necessary in order to do that is completely different.
So is that why the British were actually building ships for the Confederacy and selling them to them in their own shipyards because they couldn't actually ship anything over?
Well, think about it, okay? The carrying capacity of the ships back then weren't that great. For the amount of weight, although the space needed for the plates wouldn't have actually been that much, the weight of them would have been ridiculous. So there would have been effectively, you'd have been sending transport ships over, almost half empty by volume, but by mass would have been ridiculously heavy, very low floating in the water, so they would have been so much easier to destroy. It was easier, really, for us to actually provide you the actual vessel itself than to send materials over. That was the problem.
Yeah.
And even if they sent the steel over, you have no furnaces. You don't have the metal workers. You don't have the, for all intents and purposes, to be able
Well,
to.
you did in Richmond, and if the Confederates would have been smart, like I've argued in previous weeks, MC, when it was just me and you, if they would have recaptured Norfolk, then they could have done something. 40, I know you tried to talk, and I'm throwing it to you now. What do you think the impact would have been if Jefferson Davis actually industrialized the South and made an effort at it and made places like that weren't being touched by the war, like the Carolinas, until the very end of the war, made them actually industrialize and build raw materials? Because you did have Virginia, and you did have the coal for furnaces. You did have ways to build these things. The South isn't empty of minerals. I mean, they can get iron.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the only state that I know of that was semi-industrialized was Virginia, which I suppose would, it is kind of funny to me that they were building ironclads right under the nose of the Union. I do find that quite funny, but I don't even think that they would have the capacity to actually industrialize their nation as a whole, or at least to the extent that the Union had. Because even if they did industrialize, I mean, I don't think that they would have the population density or the means of recruiting of men to actually keep the fight going for much longer than maybe 5 years max if they were industrialized to the full capacity, But I don't even think that they would have been able to industrialize. I mean, they were an agricultural society, the South. They didn't necessarily have the means of. Maybe they had the means to extract iron, but not in the capacity that they needed. And Jensen's right. Why would they trade with you? Why would they trade with the South, rather? What does the South have to offer? Tobacco? Maybe. Cotton? Yeah, but the British can always get that from Egypt during the 1960s, when Egypt was blossoming with the cotton puffs.
1860s.
Well, 1860s, yeah, but
Yeah,
cotton was king in the South.
1960?
Yeah, you did.
Said 1960.
Oh, sorry, I meant 1860.
Wow.
So
this is
something blossoming in
long-
Egypt in the 1960s, but it wasn't frickin' cotton.
Well, no, they were growing cotton, quite a bit of cotton. British were importing primarily cotton from Egypt.
You missed my point, dude. You totally missed the point.
Oh, I think I did. Okay, but Yeah, I don't think that anyone would be willing to trade with the South just because the South doesn't have much to offer. Aside from maybe hemp or tobacco, maybe would be my best guess.
Well, I mean, okay, to contradict you a little bit, they were trading, and so were the French. And like we said earlier, the British were building our warships. Not very many, you slow fuckers. Stop getting drunk and build some ships. Anyway,
Oh, no. Wait, I'm going to defend here. It might not have made you many ships, but the ones we sent you were pretty amazing. Come on, let's be honest.
Yeah,
You
that is
want
true.
quality or quantity? Let's break this down here. Quality or quantity, sir?
fair enough. You got me there because yeah, the Alabama. I've never really because I mean you don't ever really look into the Confederate Navy, and that's why we're doing a whole episode on it with extra people, and it's been a bit longer than normal episodes because nobody ever covers it because it wasn't that impactful really, but it is an interesting subject.
Agreed.
Yep, it's an interesting subject just to demonstrate the futility of the Confederacy overall.
So,
Oh, yeah, I already knew this was going to be like fucking the Battle of Gettysburg. Like, I already knew, the South got their butts kicked, and I already knew how this was going to play out. So go ahead.
if I may make a point here with the discussion of the industrialization, I'm not saying that the South would have been as good as the North with its industrialization, but if it hadn't declared war when it did, and instead had prepared and actually started industrializing, I think it would have had a better time. The problem was that, per se, it went straight into the fighting without the preparation beforehand.
Well,
That's all I'm trying to point out.
if they would have delayed
Yeah.
any longer, all right, then you can pretty much kiss the entire state of Virginia goodbye. The state of Virginia would not have sided with the South.
Can I ask, could you elaborate?
Yeah, because industrialization changes the dynamics. If you're trying to industrialize, you're going to have to sit up there and change how your population functions. And as a result of industrialization, more than anything else, this is why slavery was dying in the North, right? What was it? It was because it wasn't efficient. It didn't work, right? When people, you need people to build things, all right? People have to want to build things.
Yeah.
If they're slaves, they don't necessarily want to build things, right? They have to do what the master says, but that doesn't mean I want to sit up there necessarily, build them a railroad or anything else. So as industrialization starts to take place, this is what starts to shift the economies in various ways. Virginia, all right, which had been a massive slaveholding state, right, at the beginning of the Revolutionary War and so on. By the time of the Civil War, less than 30% of the population are now slaves. All right, that's a massive decrease. All right, in the population, from a demographic standpoint, in the populations. All right, if you would have waited another 10, 15 years, that probably would have been down to maybe 15% or less. All right, so then okay, yeah. Why would I join? Why would I join the South? Now you got to remember, as there's fewer and fewer slaves, you get more and more abolitionists as part of the population base. All right. So once again, why then would Virginia necessarily secede? All right. This is true of not just Virginia, but of other areas as well. Another place they could have industrialized is actually in Georgia. Georgia, you could have ramped up industrialization.
Really? Wow.
If you because of where it's situated, there's a lot of advantages to industrializing in Georgia if they had so gone that way. They didn't. They hadn't. All right. Simply because the agrarian societies around them. All right. Their industrialization went only so far as let's produce trains to ship cotton around, right, and tobacco and so forth. But they could have changed that land use dramatically if they had so desired. But there was no reason for them to do it at the time. But given an industrialization push, okay, you would have seen fewer and fewer slave states willing to fight from a Confederate standpoint.
Yeah, but I'm talking about industrializing within the deep South to where they can defend their factories and all that, and then shipping it out via rail.
If you industrialize in the deep South, all right, your percentage of slaves has to automatically start to drop. This is what I'm saying. So the impetus for the Confederacy starts to become less and less and less.
Well, at the end of the war, Jefferson Davis freed the slaves anyway. Everybody forgets that. But he started to create black regiments and granting them freedom.
And
so
what did his vice president say?
His vice president was a cunt. I'm not defending him.
His vice president said, "If the black people can become good soldiers, then our entire philosophy of the Confederacy."
Yeah, but Alexander Stevens was a fucking idiot. Like, don't throw Stevens in my face. Everybody does that. He's a fucking idiot. What about the Secretary of the Treasury, who was a Jewish man? Oh, everybody forgets that too. How about the fucking Indian whole regiments that existed and didn't surrender until after Lee did?
Yeah,
I mean,
that were busy freaking killing other Indians in an Indian Civil War, the Cherokee Civil War.
You see, this is a very diverse group of slaveholders. This is. It's not that bad. 40. It's not that bad.
God damn it. Californians. What can you do with them?
Nuke 'em.
Yes. Are you working on that rock? Like, you're done. But no, we usually only go about an hour. I do want to still hang out in fucking Discord if you guys are free. That sounds like fun. But I think maybe we should wrap this episode up here. I think we're going back to the Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac next week. We're not going back to the
Army of Northern Virginia. It hasn't been created yet.
It's going to be created in this next episode, I believe. So there you go. Fair enough.
Yes. We're going to go over the Peninsula campaign.
Yeah, exactly. And isn't that also called the 7 days? Or am I thinking of two different campaigns?
Peninsula the 7 days battles were the end of the Peninsula campaign.
Okay. And nobody ever covers the 7 days. And that's where Lee does. Okay, that's when Lee stops being Granny Lee and becomes the general he was meant to be. He whoops the fucking North's ass. Although the South takes heavy casualties, right, MC?
The term "whoop their ass." If that would have been Grant, it would have been freaking Lee. Would have wiped out his entire force and been running back to Richmond.
Yeah, but who ended up running instead? That's all I'm saying.
That has and who couldn't prevent it?
We beat the shit out of you guys, but I mean, you beat the shit out of us too. That's what that conversation sounds like.
Yeah. Well, no, he's not wrong. The poor generalship of McClellan was on full display during the Peninsula campaign, up and down. And in many ways, this is an absolute disaster for the Union forces, simply because of the Union General McClellan. And it's this specifically that creates the dynamic that Lincoln has to realize. Okay, McClellan wasn't the answer. Even though he was forced to bring him back for the Antietam campaign later on, McClellan isn't the answer. It isn't the person that he's looking for. All right, and it's really on display during these next few battles.
Well, no, and I enjoyed you guys being on here. This doesn't have to be just MC and I. So if you guys are free next weekend. Right, you're good next weekend, MC, or do you have to go out of town for work or whatever?
No, I'm next weekend should be fine. If something comes up, I'll let you know.
Okay, but yeah, no, I enjoyed this, and there was a little bit more banter, which is fun. And we still stayed on topic. It wasn't the red eye stream, so that's good. We didn't divulge into Nazi penguins until just now, when I mentioned it. But I think we're gonna wrap this up here. Any last thoughts from the panel?
Yeah, I think what you really need for the Civil War series is you need a good anime outro. That way you can be like, next time on the Civil War, and then they'll sing something in
Yeah, it'll say the
squinty-eyed language.
it'll say the Jewish connection, like fucking was that Spud in the chat?
Jewish connection during the Civil War. Yeah. Next time on the Civil
now
War.
that's the no, now that's their fault too. Like, god damn it, MC, what are you keep doing this shit?
Yeah, you were the one who brought up the Jews.
I did not start this one. This was all your own doing, Mad Dodge.
Oh, but Jensen, no, because there really was a British influence, and later on they actually have observers within the army, and I would like to talk a little bit more about that. So if you're free next weekend, dude, I think we're all for history buffs. So I mean, yeah, we can open up the panel a little bit more.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah, and I am interested actually, because I actually had no idea about this, but at one point, what was it? The HMS, or no, it was this. I totally forgot. Oh, it was the HL Hudley or something like that. When it broke the blockade, that allowed one of the Confederate generals to send a letter to Spain. So I am interested of the influence that Spain had on the Civil War, because I had no idea that there was anything along those lines going on.
Yeah, I do believe Jefferson Davis sent as many letters out as he fucking could to as many countries. The Pope, actually, when he was captured, the Pope sent him a crown of thorns, pretty much comparing him to Jesus, in other words. And that's really an interesting story that we'll get into later.
Yeah.
Like I said, I would love to open
Pope
this
said,
panel
"Crown
up.
of Thorns, you deserve this more than Jesus did."
Yeah, I don't think that's what he meant. And the Vatican archives opened up that letter.
Here, wear this.
So I'll end up
See if this fits.
yeah,
Oh,
it's better than the dress, right, MC? You fucking cunt.
He became a dress. He had a dress and a crown. What else does he want?
Okay, all right. Fake hashtag fake news.
Jefferson Davis, the Queen.
Yeah, who knew he was LGBTQ double X fucking YZ? I didn't know.
All right, I think it's time to wrap it up.
Yeah. On that note, we're out of here. Good night. Good luck, and don't fucking go to France.